Hi there. Good evening, everyone. My name's Councillor Lee Bridgen. And thank you for joining the Scrutiny Children's Services Review Group. I'll just start off with the usual housekeeping announcements. So just a reminder to everyone present that the meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public. Any exempt or private items on the agenda will be taken at the end of the meeting, and the live stream will cease prior to the meeting moving into private. There might be a short delay while that happens. A recording of the public part of the meeting will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. Will remote participants joining the meeting using Teams, please turn your cameras on and use the hands up icon to indicate a question or comment. Turn microphones on to speak and off when finished. In-person attendees, please remember to switch microphones on when speaking and speak directly into the microphone and turn off when finished. Would in-person attendees please also switch mobile phones off or place them on silent? Okay. So we'll move on to the first item of the agenda, which is apologies for absence.
Apologies from Councillor Donlan.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to the next item of the agenda, which is to review and approve the minutes from the last two meetings, one dated 12th of April 2022 and the other the 17th of May 2022, which was linked to the annual meeting. Any comments on the minutes? Okay, so we can take those as approved then. Thank you. Moving on to the next item of the agenda, which is disclosure of. Oh, hang on. I see Dr. Mo has his hand up. Is that in relation to the minutes or the next agenda item?
Sorry, Chair, it's the next agenda item. I apologise.
Okay, no problem. So moving on to item 3, which is disclosure of interest. So Dr. Mohammed, go ahead.
Sure, I'm a governor in the Meads Primary School, Grasmere Nursery School, and the Warden Hill Infants. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Keynes.
Yeah, a growing interest in Queen Elizabeth School, Richmond Hill School. And there's another one, isn't there? Oh, the virtual school. Yeah.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item of the agenda then, which is urgent business. I've not been informed of anything. Nothing. Item 5, references from committees and other bodies.
None, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6, which is the Chair's update. I don't have anything to report under this agenda item, so we will move on. What we're going to do, we're going to take item 9 first. So we'll move on to item 9, which is the Care Leaver Ambition Action Plan, which is in the capable hands of our Service Director for Children's Operations. Thank you. It's on page 26 to 38 of your agenda.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for having the opportunity to share this with members this evening. So I'm going to take it that, because it's obviously a very detailed action plan, that everyone's had the opportunity to have read the plan, and then obviously we'll come to questions in a moment. But just to remind everybody that the 2-day formal visit took place in February, where we were very fortunate to have the National Implementation Advisor for Care Leavers, Mark Riddell, to come to Luton and talk to us about what he thought our offer looked like for young people that were leaving our care. And within that, he talked to lots of young people and staff and other services. And he came away really with 22 recommendations which were shared with us. And what we did was take the opportunity to develop the Care Leaver Ambition action plan, which we're really fortunate that Robin Porter, our Chief Executive, has agreed to lead in terms of the implementation. So you'll notice within the report that there are a number of actions that have been pulled from other reports to create a joined up process, really. So just to kind of pick out some key areas from Mark's visit that I think would be really important for us to just remember and note this evening, which is the first one was to develop the champion model approach. And the challenge for us is about how do we all take responsibility as for being corporate parents or corporate grandparents, or, you know, looking at that whole model and that role of responsibility. And obviously you will know as members that you have a key role and responsibility, and that's set out, and that's something that we may consider on doing some refresh training for those members who've not had that training before, or for those that might want to have a refresh in terms of what does that mean as a member, what does that mean for you in terms of how you discharge your duties and functions. So the champion model, though, is about everyone championing, so not just members, but how we get linking into kind of Luton 2040, the child-friendly town. How do we get the whole vision together for our children having the best opportunities that they can? So part of that was point 3, and we've already had some successes with this, is to employ care leavers within our if you like, the family firm. And we've already had at least 5 care leavers who've come to work for, or are coming on board now in terms of apprenticeships with us, which is a fantastic achievement and quite quickly achieved, really. Sorry, that was point 9, not 3. 3 is to employ care leaver ambassadors and champions. So something again that we're working on, and I think it's important that we all take that role you know, as seriously as we can. So and also then to, in terms of the 2040 vision, how we go forward and link the town-friendly, child-friendly town to ensuring that other employees within Luton are supported to employ our care leavers and children that have been in our care, so they have those opportunities. So and within that, then working from a partnership point of view to develop the health offer. So our 18 to 25-year-olds, which again, he's suggesting could offer free prescriptions, dentals or glasses, for us to look at a favoured approach for adult and mental health services, and to, again, link back to the business event to match the aspiration and audit to local business and community. So those are just some of the sort of headlines, if you like, in terms of the recommendations. And then 19 is to develop a 21 to 25-year-old offer, which includes unaccompanied asylum seekers, care leavers entering and leaving custody, and young parents. So some real vulnerable young people cited in there, but it's a specific offer for those young people with specific vulnerabilities, as well as, you know, broadening out our offer. And that's something that we're currently working on, developing a supported lodging scheme that sort of builds on that kind of how you can build on a fostering offer, which is more of a lodging offer for young people that don't necessarily want to be in a fostering type environment, but they definitely want to be connected into you know, a family, in terms of whatever that might look like. So those are the sort of key points. There is a lot of information in the plan. We are working really closely with housing, and we're also linking in terms of how young people can access housing and the correct housing, and that we support their ability to hold their tenancies, etc. And then pathway plans, in terms of that's the plan that determines for a young person leaving care what the local authority, what they're entitled to, what they need, and what partners in the local authority will deliver. So I'll probably just pause there, because I could go on for a long time going through all of the detail, just to see if there's any sort of initial questions, Chair, or any feedback for this item. Thank you.
Councillor Moles, yeah.
Yes, I have read through it. Super ideas, but where are you going to get the financing from to activate a lot of the suggestions that have come out in this document? It's a bit, you know, I was very concerned because I know your budget is really slim. They didn't offer you any more money, did they? To carry out
No.
these tasks that you've got supposed to be carrying out, because it's quite a vast program there that he's put in, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that,
very,
yeah.
very difficult, and it obviously will they have to employ more people to cope with this if you can actually carry it out.
Yeah, I mean, there's that's a really good point. I think there are a number of actions that are specific to changing the way that we do things, so they would be within our gift to do within resource, and then there are other actions that we would want to look at how we can take those forward with partners. There is also I'm sort of minded to mention, but you know, aware of timing tonight, etc., that the care review has picked up a number of specific issues that over the last 2 to 3 years, probably a little bit longer actually, children's services in the round have been given more and more duties without that sort of increase of funding, and that's been picked up as a part of the national review to look at how will children's services going forward meet the recommendations, for instance, from the care review. And Mandra, I know it's in the billions, the tab that the bill that's linked to the care review, so in the billions. So that's currently going through due process in terms of whether that's going to be accepted or not. So I think it's a really valid point. We're going to, wherever we are in this plan, we are going to try our very best to look at what resources we've currently got. Is that about doing something differently and using the resources we've got? And then also, how do we engage with our partners to also look at how do we share resources to give better outcomes. But there is an absolute context to financial sustainability, given the demand, and especially for unaccompanied asylum seekers, that we know that that is a dilemma for nationally. But the dilemma is making sure that we have enough funding to make sure that they're safe and okay.
Can I just ask then, with regard to asylum seekers, how many have we actually got in town now?
We've got 37 going up to 38. We're coming very close to our quota.
Maximum.
Yeah. So and that we manage that through the sort of national scheme. So yes, interesting. And we had a young person coming in today. And that's how I know it's probably tripping over to 38.
And are they under 25?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a couple that are slipping over, but they haven't been processed. So we are continuing to support because they're in a difficult position. So there's an element to us helping them to get their independence when, and we have raised this with the Home Office formally in terms of a number of young people that have been stuck in the system, if you like, because they're waiting to be processed by the Home Office, and the Home Office have significant delays. So, but on the whole, most of our young people are under 25. Yeah.
Councillor Wahid. Don't.
Yes, is it on now? Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your report. My question, one of the question is, Councillor Mole has, I've got the answer. Councillor Mole has answered it, asked, and you've answered it. Regarding how much more funding do we need for this program? Did you say? Couldn't really make.
No, because I'm not. Thank you for that question. I'm not asking for funding specific to this programme this evening. So I'm not. It's not about a financial ask. It's about how do we currently realign the resources that we've got and use them in the best way going forward. So for us, it isn't. It's about realigning the duties that we've got and the resources we've got, and working with our partners to also enable some. So it's how do we use the resources we've got in a way that gives us the best outcomes for our care leavers. But we're not at this point asking for specific resource to be able to deliver the ambitious plan, because it is about our ambitions. That may change in the future.
Thank you. It's really heartbreaking to hear the care leavers feedback, like one of them on page 31 on top of page, that I think is I do not understand the housing cost and everything paid for, but if wasn't now I've been debt, how she's in debt, and she's in a really poor condition housing, and she's so worried, like affecting my health and my baby's health. It's really, and then we got the asylum seekers on top of that. Yeah, it's quite heartbreaking. And I just need to know about the leisure facilities you're talking about. How many care leavers have we got with children? How many children have we got? How many care leavers who have got children, and how many children are there? Yeah.
I don't have the answer to that off the top of my head. So yeah, there are a number of young adults who are also now parents. And it's about how we share their information, and then it's about how we support them to be able to manage some of those difficulties. And I think so there will constantly be, for young people, there very often is, not just for care leavers, but for young people who are seeking independence and stepping out into the world on their own, there are dilemmas, and we have to share those dilemmas, because it's often the case that it reflects the dilemmas of wherever they are. And so housing, kind of work opportunities, those are the dilemmas for young people, aren't they? So it's about how do we then work together to understand and hear them when they've got that issue, but then to make sure that they're safe and we support them. And it's also about helping them to become young parents. So it is about supporting them to be the best parents they can be, and supporting them with their children. So our new family partnership service works very often with, I guess, those young adults that may not particularly, need to be in a statutory social work service, but actually would benefit from some good parenting advice. And we also work with our public health colleagues, etc., to make sure the programmes of support to ensure that they are able to change the outcomes maybe of some of their experiences going forward. And there are some fantastic examples with that. I couldn't, because it's quite a small cohort. So if I started to give examples, you'd know who it was. But we have got some fantastic examples where our care leavers have been very successful parents, and and are doing well. Some of them working for us, doing well.
Ask you just is it possible to give the breakdown of ethnicity of the asylum seekers, please?
And that's often, that comes through a report that goes to the corporate parenting board. So we give a very detailed report in terms of the young people that are in our care. So that would be the next reporting, which I think is in July. That would come through that report. Outside, if you wanted to have that detail specifically, then I could always pull that together for you. But otherwise, it's something that we look at through the performance in the corporate parenting board.
Thank you.
Councillor Keynes.
Right. I'll come to my rant in a minute. The virtual school head, has he been shown this letter? Is he involved?
He certainly has, and might ask my colleague Paul Senior to come in there. Paul, did you want to say anything from the virtual school perspective of the care leavers ambition plan?
Absolutely. A number of good plans in place. They're very ambitious for this area of work, and our virtual school are well regarded, not just locally but regionally, for their practice and their ambition and the programmes of work undertaken in this space and how this aligns with this agenda. So a simple answer to our councillor colleagues' request is absolutely, they're cited, they're aware of it, and they're engaged in supporting and working with this programme of work as part of an integrated systems approach.
Right, thank you. My other comment is Mr. Riddle keeps on about buy-ins. What's he refer to in buy-ins?
Sorry.
The what? Buy-in. Well, It keeps mentioning a buy-in leads to uncertainty. Page 29.
Yeah, so it's on page 29 under the operational model and local offer. It says this lack of buy-in leads to uncertainty. I think I think it's just, yeah.
It's buy-in, is that
Yeah.
what you're? Yeah, sorry, oh, sorry, Mandy. We're both. I was a bit slow there. Sorry, I was thinking. I thought you said bobbins, and I was thinking bobbins. I thought that I didn't spotted that in the report then. So I think that was a sewing reference. But sorry. So the buy-in. So it's about us. Are we committed? Are we interested enough? So from your perspective as a member, do you accept and are you interested, and are you kind of really engaged in understanding and knowing what our, how our care leavers need to be supported? And that's what he means by buy-in. So buying into the idea.
It's a comment, really. I think this letter is absolutely dreadful, personally. I mean, he's very good. He's a typical civil servant. He's very good at telling us what we should be doing, but he's not giving any indication of how we should be doing it. Or there's no more finance. Well, how are we going to do what he wants us to do if we don't have the necessary backup? I feel that a letter should go to him asking him how he intends to finance us and do it.
I guess I take your point, and I think obviously we all look at something and form an opinion. From our perspective, the minister has given his buy-in, if you like, by employing a national advisor, and I do think Mark Priddell has experience of being a care leaver. So it's about how he can support the minister having the opportunity to have a voice, and he goes out to talk to care leavers and local authorities. And I suppose from our point of view, there's a fine balance between somebody coming and telling us what to do, which we'd probably think, well, we're probably not sure that we need you to do that, but we also want you to have a lens into our world to look at when you've walked around you've walked the footpath yourself, you've been in those shoes, you've talked to others, and you know what works well. What do you think we might want to consider? So he's coming back, Councillor Keynes. He's coming back, so maybe you'll have the opportunity to talk to him.
Well, yeah, perhaps when he comes back, he'd like to come and talk to us.
Well, maybe, yeah, something we could think about, definitely.
Then we can have a go at him.
Councillor Malcolm, you're trying to, yeah.
Thanks. A question and then a suggestion. So the question is whether this covers children or young people who've been into care and then exited care again before they're 16 or 18 or whatever it is. It 18? We talk about someone becoming a care leaver, because actually that group who go in and out of care, certainly educationally, have worse outcomes than young people who go into care and are stable in care. So I think that might be another place to look if it doesn't include that group in terms of expanding to make this offer to those young people as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. There's a complexity around the duties, which I won't go into now, and they're referred to as relevant, former relevant, etc., which sets out for people that have been in care, youngsters that have been in our care, what duties are they entitled to from a leaving care perspective. We have increased, we have now linked our personal advisors to our young people when they reach 15 3/4. So we start developing their pathway plan around that age. And so we tend to encourage our young people to opt in. So even if they go home, we still have a duty very often to them, and we do have young people that are at home with a pathway plan, and they would then still be linked into the virtual school, and they would still, we'd still be helping them with their education and employment. So I think that we reach out to most of our young people, and we don't look at it to say what are they not entitled to. We look at, are they connected into the right support services so that they can get the best outcome. So if I can put it that way, but obviously we do have to look at those specific duties that the local authority have got, and they are included in this process to make sure that those that do come out of care, some of them come out quite quickly, and we might be a bit worried about, well, okay, is that the right decision? How do we do that? So there is a number of complex processes that we have to follow, which you technical detail really, but to reassure you that it isn't just about those with a long-term history of care. It's about those young people that we know.
Be interested to understand what proportion. So probably it's most, if not all, who have gone through the care system and been a care leaver at 18 still in care. What proportion of those who've kind of been in and out of care take up the offer would be interesting, because actually understanding that might be helpful. There might be more work we could do to encourage young people who have been in and out of care to take up the offer, because it strikes me that it's a really useful offer, but we can only offer it if we know that someone is in that situation.
It's quite low numbers. It is quite low numbers. I mean, there's also another part of the legislation that says that if a young person comes out of care after a short period of time on their 16th birthday, then the director has to see their plan to go home and sign that off. And I was looking at the numbers the other day, and most over the last 12 months, I think there's about 4 or 5 that have done that age 16, that have come in for a short period of time in care and gone straight out. Most of them stay in or stay connected, and they've all got pathway plans and PAs, but we can certainly break that down to look at. Some of them still come in and out. So some of them go into a semi-independent living at 18, and then they decide actually they're going to go back home, even at 18. So then we're small enough that I can, I know that my colleagues and I know who they are and where they are and what they're doing. But yeah, I think it's something that we could drill down on for sure. We could do that in the Corporate Parenting Board, or we could do that here. You'd have to let me know how you'd want us to proceed with that.
I guess as long as it gets picked up wherever it's most sensible would be my perspective. The suggestion I had was in relation to the council tax exemption, which, although blue, is not possible in the current articulation of where that's got to. Could perhaps our lead member for Children's Services, in conjunction with our chair of the Scrutiny Children's Committee, write an open letter to the lead member for Children's Services in Central Beds? Perhaps they could also write a letter, so to like Shapeman, perhaps we could also write a professional letter to the guy that did the audit to say this isn't possible and here's why, and maybe national government could make a direction to all local authorities to cooperate on this, because we think it'd be a really good idea. But we can't do it by ourselves because it's just not possible.
I know that Robin has picked it up in the first instance, but I think you're absolutely right. I would think that we would support that, Amanda.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, certainly could do if you could. Yeah, record that. Certainly, yeah. Any other questions or comments? No. Was there anything else to add to your report? Or?
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. So the recommendation is to note the work completed to date and provide further support potentially as champions as we develop this model and strengthen our care leaver offer. And I think that report is approved. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the next item in the agenda, which we're going back to item 7, which is the Children's Services Ofsted Improvement Plan, the bi-monthly update, which is in the hands of the Service Director for Quality and Improvement.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, so before you is the latest bi-monthly update in relation to our progress on our improvement plan. Last Children's Improvement Board meeting took place on the 9th of May. I've highlighted in my report some key improvements, just to pick up on some of them. So child protection visits timeliness is really strong, still at 98%. The timeliness of our initial child protection conference, so they are expected to take place within 15 days of initiating an investigation into a safeguarding concern. That's now significantly above the national and statistical neighbour averages at 86.9%. Long-term placement stability for looked after children is still strong at 71.1, slightly below our stat neighbour average, but less than 1 percentage point. So it's within our tolerance levels, and it's certainly not, we're not resting on our laurels. That's an area that we're still trying to improve, but our performance is comparable with our statistical neighbours and the national average. We have reduced our number of children who are on child protection plans, and that's been through a range of things really, but most in particular the approach that we've taken with the Family Partnership Service, both in working at an early stage with families to prevent risks from escalating to the point where they need a child protection plan, but also working with families where a child's on a plan and working with families to develop the situation to reduce those risks in the family home, and therefore the plan no longer needing to be required. Equally, our looked after children cohort has reduced recently slightly, but it still remains significantly below our statistical neighbour average. So if you look at that in the raw, approximately based on Luton population, we ordinarily, if we were at that average level, we would have 35 more children in care, but we don't. And that's been a success of other interventions that we've applied. So the Edge of Care team that was funded through an Investor Save project has worked with 20 children on the cusp of care and has managed to prevent 19 of those 20 from coming into care in the last 12 months, in the last financial year rather. And then also just want to highlight the work that's being done with colleagues at ELFT in the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services to make sure that we've got a range of early intervention support available to make sure that our looked after children receive early interventions when it comes to mental health and emotional well-being issues. Another real strength for us is that just under 93% of our looked after children are attending a good or outstanding school. That's certainly not the picture in other local authorities. And then also, if you look at the whole population of Luton children and young people, not just our children in care or those on a plan, 97.7% are in employment, education or training. And the 2.3% that aren't have ready access to support to enable them to do so. We've still got some significant challenges, and they're highlighted in the attached reports. So our recruitment of permanent experienced social work staff is still challenging, but it's not a unique challenge for Luton. It's a national challenge, and certainly it was a feature of the care review feedback around the use of agency staff and also permanent recruitment. And recently at a practice leader forum, Josh McAllister attended along with a DFE lead. Josh McAllister led the care review. The DFE lead made it very clear that recruitment of staff and use of agency staff was going to be one of the priorities for the first 6 months in the government's response to the care review. And other than that, I've attached the two reports. The exception report, that is an exception report on our overarching strategic improvement plan, and it highlights the areas where we feel there's still more that we need to do. And as you will see from that report, that's heavily focused on our recruitment and retention of permanent staff. And then there's a workforce development board report that goes into more detail about the current position and the historical position and shows you the trajectory of our reduction of the percentage of agency staff overall, albeit with an increase in headcount across the whole service. That has not, there is a higher number of agency staff. So I'll pause there, and if there's any questions, I will happily respond.
Councillor Moles?
I'm sorry to have to say this yet again. I have a whole list here of acronyms, and I'm sorry, when I look at the Children's Social Care Services Plan exception report, there's quite a few there that I couldn't make out. I don't know whether everybody else is better than me at it. There's ASYE.
We've previously provided you with information about that, councillor. It's assessed and supported you in employment. So it basically means
Not on my list.
no. When you've raised this with us previously, we provided a list of acronyms and their explanations. But I will pick that up with the report writer. If you look at the main report, I've made sure that I've covered all of the acronyms. The reports that I've appended went to the improvement board, where obviously those that attending would have had greater knowledge of what that was. But in the past, when you've raised that ASYE one, we have provided a glossary of what those mean. It basically means that if a newly qualified social worker, their first year in employment, they have to have a reduced caseload, they have to undertake certain basic mandatory training, and they have to demonstrate that they meet certain competencies before they're then able to take on some of the statutory functions of the social work role. So it's what our social work academy supports. And it's been a key. The Social Work Academy has been a key tool in our attempts to recruit permanent staff by providing them with a very supportive environment within which they can develop those key competencies in their first year in employment. What I would say is the care review recommendations suggest that actually that should move to a 2-year initial period as part of a 5-year overarching what they call early career framework, where social workers will be expected to develop and demonstrate that they have developed certain key skills to strengthen the skill base within the workforce.
Thank you.
Councillor Keynes?
Yeah, well, I'm going to back up Councillor Moles on this again. There's numerous ones here, which once again, if we knew what they were talking about, we wouldn't even have to have a long detailed description from your good self. What's RAG? R-A-G?
Red, amber, green.
Sorry?
Red, amber, green. It's a way of rating actions to
Okay.
show you how progressed they are.
Right. Recommendations, the HOS?
Head of service.
Thank you. And further down, the FASS.
Family Assessment and Support Service.
Right, okay. Well, once we've got all of them, we know what we're talking about. But it would be helpful if we could be a bit more careful on these abbreviations. It's getting a bit silly. Thank you, Damon.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Malcolm?
Thanks. The SDQ, the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire improvement in performance was notable and really good. Is that a trend that's the same nationally? Is it something to do with coming out of the pandemic or anything like that? Are we nationally above others? Is it sustainable? Is basically my question.
It's a bit difficult to answer that at the moment, Councillor Malcolm, because that's reported nationally in retrospect. So it's usually there's a lag in getting the national and regional figures for that. Obviously, we can report on our own figures pretty much in month on month, but the updates we get from regionally and nationally we only get once a year. So it's going to be interesting to see what the outturn is. Those statutory returns are currently being finalised by local authorities, and that data should become available around about October. So probably be in a better position to answer that then. Certainly, I think we're going to see a mixed picture. I think it very much depends on how different local authorities have addressed the issue. But as I pointed out on the 6th bullet point under paragraph 5, it really emphasises the work that's been done by our colleagues in ELFT and Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services around early access to services at the earliest point that emotional wellbeing issues are identified, rather than waiting until those needs have become more acute. So I do think that's why one of the reasons why that SDQ average figure has dropped so much it's reduced by 50% in the last 12 months. And when you consider that a significant proportion of that was during the pandemic, I think that's, as you say, it's quite marked, that improvement. But as to whether that will be sustained, I mean, certainly there's been a slight rise to, I think it's 12.6 in May, but that's still, significantly below last year's figures for statistical neighbours. But as to whether it will be on this year's figures is we will only know when we get that data from the looked after children return in October.
Councillor Wahid.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Damon, for your report. My question is on top of page 13. Nearly 93% of looked after children attend a good or outstanding school. What is what is this compared to our statistical neighbours?
I'm afraid I
averages?
don't have that figure to hand. I'm not sure it's something that all local authorities report on, but I can certainly ask our business information colleagues to see if we can provide it for you.
Okay, and what about national average? Or yeah, so
Well,
you won't.
again, I don't have that figure to hand. I'm afraid. I think I'd have to follow that up with our business intelligence colleagues.
Thank you.
I think Amanda Lewis wants to come in on this point. Yeah.
Thanks. Damien's right, we don't have the detail for statistical neighbours. What we do know, Damien, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, is that in relation to the Eastern region, which is another way that we look at our data, albeit that obviously Luton is very, very different to many of our partners within the Eastern region. We were actually at the top of our Eastern region data, and had the most children in good and outstanding schools of anywhere else across the region, which is all credit to our school leaders. So that was a very positive position, Damien, that came up, I think, from the Eastern region data set. So not quite the answer for statistical neighbours, but really, really positive when you look at the who makes up the Eastern region and how well Luton's schools are doing in providing for our children who are looked after.
Thank you, Amanda, for that. That's really positive.
I think Paul Senior also wants to come in on this point.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Never miss an opportunity to flag a really good point that, Amanda has just said it, and Damien said it, that Luton is punching above its weight and is above national average when it comes to the performance of our schools being good or outstanding. We're above national average. The national average is less than 90%. We're over 90%. So you've heard it once, you've heard it twice, now you've heard it 3 times. This is something we should be embracing and welcoming, that our schools are making a difference locally, and our children's social care colleagues are working closely with our schools with a focus on the most vulnerable children to keep them local as well. So it's a really good story for Luton, something for us to be proud of.
I can actually provide an update if you want, Chair, because I've found the figures for the Eastern region. I've got them in front of me now. So in Eastern region, it varies from council to council from anywhere from 71% up to 93%, and Luton's the top of that at 93%.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Petts, thank you.
Yeah, can you tell me how the Social Worker Academy is getting on, and is it helping to drive down the number of agency staff that we're currently employing?
Thanks for your question, Councillor. I think, can I point you to a particular page in one of the reports, and that will show you what our projections are in terms of the impact that will have. So if you look at page, forgive me, I'm just trying to find the right page. Page 17 of your pack, you'll see a table titled 2.0 Forecast of Headcount to December 22. And that, if you look at the line that's labelled ASYE, the third line down, you'll see that at the moment we have 18 ASYE, so newly qualified social workers being supported to complete their first year in practice. That will increase to 34 by the end of the year. So we will have an extra 16 newly qualified social workers permanently employed, who not only will be getting excellent support from us to develop into our social workers of the future, but also that will then have a trickle down effect. And once they've completed their first year in practice, we will then be in a position where we can start to release more of our agency staff. And then basically, effectively, what we've done is we've doubled the cohort. So the cohort previously was in the region of 15 each intake. It's now 30. And obviously, there's been some investment to achieve that, but that investment will be paid back threefold and then some. but as long as we make sure that we continue with this train, and we were projecting that if you look each year, if we're doubling that cohort, we should be in a position by the end of the following year, so December 23, to even further reduce that agency reliance. So we're projecting that by December we will be down to 24% agency staff as opposed to 33 at the moment. And the other advantage is that those newly qualified social workers being in our social work academy, not only we are developing their generic skills, but we're also making sure that they understand the way that Luton want our vision, the way that we want to do our run our business, and the way that we want to deliver quality services to families. Because every local authority has a different, a slightly different, nuanced approach. So it's educating, it's developing social workers in the Luton way, for want of a better description. So that's one of the big advantages of it. But every local authority is having the challenge of this permanent recruitment, and it wouldn't have been such a feature of the care review if it wasn't such a national issue. I think a lot of us in the profession were hoping that there would be recommendations about how to describe it, how the the amount of influence the agencies have over the market, but that hasn't arrived yet. That recommendation isn't there. But I think by the introduction of this expectation of this 5-year early career framework, and also they've introduced an expert child protection role. It's going to be very difficult for people who join agencies very soon after qualifying to achieve the status of that expert role. So I think we may see some workers who want to develop themselves and become those experts starting to look at coming back into permanent employment.
Thank you. One other question. What about caseloads now per social worker?
I can't give you the exact figure, but certainly it's still significantly lower than it was when Ofsted did their last full inspection. We've had some challenges in one service that we've addressed through some creative use of our existing resource, but most teams still have an average of 18 children per social worker. There's one service where it's a little bit higher than we would like, at around 20.
Is that still too high, 18?
Well, our goal is to make sure it's 18 for everybody, except in the care leaver team where it's slightly higher, but that's because of the nature of the work.
I thought some time ago we were talking 15.
Well, certainly our target within all of our planning has been 18 for the last 2 years. I mean, it's a difficult discussion to have, because some authorities do aim for a lower caseload level for each worker than that, but some aim for a higher one. It depends on what other support services there are around to enable them to do that work. As things stand at the moment, our goal within our plans, within our strategic plan and within our improvement plan, is 18.
Thank you.
Jo Miles?
I just wanted to commend the efforts in this area and that doubling of the number by December 22, because what it means from a school's perspective is that the more consistent the workforce is, it cements the relationship between children's services and schools, because you get the same social worker seeing a child through. So I think this is a really positive direction of travel from a school's point of view. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think sort of linked to this point, just wonder, do we have metrics on how often children have to change from one social worker to another? I'm not sure how easily measurable that is, but do we have any metrics along those lines?
We do collect data on that, Chair, but as you say, it is difficult to do direct comparisons, because by the nature of having teams doing specific functions, you have a transition between teams, and then that necessitates a change of worker. And comparing ourselves to different authorities depends on how they approach the way that they deliver their services. So, for example, some services have a specific team for doing court cases. We don't. So that would be an extra transition that in a local authority that did that would be in place. We monitor that. I haven't got any figures I can quote to you right now, but certainly we can bring something back the next time if you would like us to do that.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And obviously, you know, we can only compare, I guess, against ourselves. But are there any sort of, I guess, KPI type targets for that?
There's there's no national targets or regional targets so we can do a direct comparison. As I say, because of the way different local authorities structure their services in different way, there's a structural reasons at times for those changes to workers. But it is something we monitor. It is something we've been working very heavily on, and we have reduced the number of young people who experience multiple changes. However, whenever you're employing agency staff who are not permanent, you know, on a permanent contract and have the flexibility to leave at short notice, it does mean that there is always going to be some level of change there. It's about how we make sure that what we've been focusing on is reducing the amount of changes, but also at the same time making sure that the transitions between workers are more effective. So, for example, making sure that wherever possible that there's joint visits undertaken between the new and the old social worker, so that there's that handover transition, and also making so that also supports young people not having to tell their story multiple times to multiple people. Have we perfected it? No, we haven't. Is it improving? Yes, it is. Is there more we can do? Yes, there is.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? I don't see any hands up. So I think we can consider that complete and the recommendation approved. Any objections? Yep. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the report. Cheers. So moving on to the next item of the agenda, which is item 8 on pages 21 to 25. It's the SEND review response to the government's green paper, which is in the hands of the Interim Service Director for Education.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just a brief introduction that I think the paper sets out the position that's been informed by a dialogue with local partners, stakeholders and providers in recent weeks. Since the consultation process went live at the end of March, the consultation process, I understand now, has been extended by 3 weeks. So it's now going to conclude on July the 22nd, as opposed to originally it was going to be July the 1st. So it will go on for a little bit longer. So today's conversation is based on the latest findings, the latest local intel that's informed our position. And the feedback makes very clear that I think everybody would sign up to the principles and the ambition of the SEND and Alternative Provision Green Paper. If it's going to improve the system and improve outcomes for children, young people and families locally, why wouldn't we? It comes with a conditional but, though, and you'll all see that from the paper, where it makes very clear that once this paper becomes a green paper, to become a white paper, the final version of recommendations and duties that will come our way, we'll then need to evaluate what the resource implications are going to be for servicing that. We'll need to be clear on what resources we'll be getting from central government to help progress that, and then what that will mean for Luton as a local area. The 2014 SEND reforms was probably the most recent big system change with a focus on SEND, and many local areas have struggled to have the resources and infrastructure to manage that. Now, we've been fortunate in Luton in recent years through our finance team working creatively, our schools and settings and partners working creatively, that we are one of the small number of local areas that actually haven't been overspent in the high needs SEND space. We've managed to keep most of our children and young people with additional complex needs having their needs met locally in mainstream schools. So our mainstream schools have been inclusive as possible. Our special schools are performing good to outstanding, and therefore it's reduced the need of children and young people with special needs having to go out of borough to access residential provision and access private sector provision as well. So we've kept the costs down. So I'm digressing slightly. I'm coming back to the original point that in the main, the view is locally, as Luton system leaders, that there is a support for the principles and the ambition of the Green Paper for SEND and alternative provision. But we wait with a watching brief, with conditional that dependent on the final version of the white paper that will probably come our way in autumn, we'll need to reevaluate what the implications are for the white paper and what that will mean for Luton. So 4 weeks ahead of the consultation concluding, you have the latest thinking in terms of what our response would look like in your paper. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Before I open up to the floor, just a question for me, really. I'm noticing paragraph 32 of the report that there's some sort of specific details given in terms of the potential cost to Luton Borough Council. I was just wondering whether there's any reasons to why that's not actually been included in, say, paragraph 20, where we've, I guess, mentioned about the likely need for additional funds, but not gone into sort of that level of detail. Is that something that would come up later, perhaps when the white paper comes out? Or I was just wondering what the reason is.
Chair, that's a good question. And at this juncture, whilst it's a green paper, it's how much time would we invest in actually going through diligence and looking at that. I would suggest we spend more time looking at the actual detail around the white paper, which is going to be the final version, and then we can evaluate the final version implications for Luton and what that will mean. At this moment, it's high level based on what the initial proposals are. But in terms of not detracting too much officer resource away from core business to focus on a draft and a green paper at this juncture would be my recommendation. So based on the information, because there's not too much detail in the green paper either. So it's only based on what we've got, can we make a high level informed decision? And having had conversations with partners in other local areas who are going through a similar evaluation as well, I think it's a proportionate response based on the information that's been available at this juncture, Chair.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, the devil will be in the detail, I'm sure. Any questions, Councillor Moles?
I have to ask this question because I'm not quite sure what the answer is going to be. So during COVID, and now we're sort of out of it, do you get figures on children that have developed a mental illness during COVID? Does that come under this umbrella or not? Like CAMS, do they come under this umbrella?
Councillor Moles, it's a good question, but it would be outside of the scope of the ambitions and the focus for the green and white paper that we're talking about at this juncture. If this is something that the Scrutiny Committee would wish to commission, I'm sure we could bring forward some information at a subsequent meeting that goes into the detail on that. But for the terms of reference for this paper, it is a focus on the SEND green paper.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, if you want to, we can add that to consider that for the future work plan. Yeah.
Thank you. So a member of my team, Elizabeth, is working on she's just completed a mental health, children and young people's mental health needs assessment, which looks at some data. We won't have that much data sort of in the most recent period post-pandemic, but there is definitely some data around impacts of the pandemic on children and young people's mental health, and the SHU survey in schools that we do annually picks up some of that as well, which is incorporated into that research, and it's developing into an action plan and a strategy. So I think it's probably on the forward plan already, but if it's not, we can definitely put it on there.
The SHU survey has already been to this board.
The mental health action plan and strategy, sorry.
Okay.
Councillor Keynes?
The public consultation, what sort of response have you had to this?
Councillor Keynes, there's not a public consultation at this moment in time. All folk, anyone who's an interested party, any partners, stakeholders, providers, members of the public can feed into the national consultation. The national consultation process, Councillor Keynes, concludes on the 22nd of July. Once that's concluded, we'll get access to a national level report that's been informed by that consultation process. So I can't tell you what that looks like from the public input as yet.
Yeah, this is a government green paper public consultation, not a.
Oh, this is the public government. Yeah, all right. Okay. Yeah.
Do you have another?
I was just a bit concerned that it's another public consultation which nobody knows anything about. But if it's a national one,
not a Luton-led initiative, Councillor Keynes.
It's the government doing this. Yeah, well, say no more.
Any other questions or comments, Councillor Malcolm? Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, reading the green paper, it did feel perhaps more than with other papers from the government I've read that there were lots of well-meaning vision statements and almost platitudes that didn't feel like they had much substance. Of course, all the things they were saying, what we would want for these children and young people, but it didn't feel like there was a huge amount of substance when I was reading it. And I felt like that was more the case than with other documents I'd read. However, it's probably not helpful for us to say that to them. I do think there's maybe, so I've been the chair of the Behaviour Inclusion Wellbeing Advisory Board, which I think has reported here before now, possibly, some of the detail of the work that's been undertaking. But that kind of looks at the area of the education system which relates to alternative provision and doesn't really focus on the special educational needs part of the education system, although there is overlap. And I think from my perspective, the green paper talks about bringing that all together into one forum, and I would have concerns about trying to do that all in the same place, because it's enough of a challenge to keep things flowing and effective just focusing on the alternative provision part of the system without bringing that all together. So I guess a bit of a concern there. And also there was some mentioning within the green paper of connections with health. I don't know if you've actually looked at the paper, but it just felt like it, again, wasn't something that would actually bring any benefit in the way that it was being thought about. It felt like it was something that was being suggested because it sounded like the right thing to do, rather than it having been thought through as something that would actually bring benefit. I don't know whether you'd have any thoughts on those things, or whether any of that could be included, if appropriate, in the response.
Councillor Malcolm, I think you make some good points. As a member of BWAB, and having had the opportunity and the good fortune to work with you on the work of BWAB in recent months, I totally understand your view on that. With regards to the system, and we call it the inclusion system, which is where that alternative provision and SEND and that overlap works. I recognise the government's ambition in this space too, because some children and young people who have their needs met at alternative provision level, there'll be an overlap with SEND. So we do need join up so that families and children and young people are only having to tell their story once. There's a single front door, they get a single plan through the process. But I would agree with you, we await the detail. Councillor Keynes made that point earlier as well. We need the detail so we can make an informed decision on the implications for Luton and what our implementation strategy and implementation plan will be like. But the paper is high level. With regards to the role of health have got a crucial role to play. When we talk about the system SEND an alternative provision working with children and young people aged 0 to 25 across the local area. Over 2,100 children and young people 0 to 25 have a statutory plan. Just over 5,000 are at SEND support stage. Our health partners have got an important role to play, as have health and care and education partners working together as part of the single plan process as well. And so there is a need to strengthen the health interface there, because many children and young people with additional needs or SEND or alternative provision needs, they have health needs as well. One of our colleagues mentioned earlier about CAMS. Where are CAMS all over this? Because CAMS, child and adolescent mental health services, have got an important role to play in terms of working with this vulnerable cohort. Speech and language therapy as well. That's another big pressure point. Access to occupational therapy as well. So there are a number of roles to play here with regards to the health part of the system as well. So we await the final detail, and the response, or the draft response, is based on what information is available so far. But I would honestly advocate for the principles that I think are the right direction of travel, but it's the right detail and the resources that are going to come along to help us implement that. I would be more keen on getting some confidence in.
Councillor Keynes?
Just inquiring, really. Is academies mentioned in this green paper? I've got a sneaking suspicion it is, isn't it?
Councillor Keynes, there's a role for academies, as there are for all parts of the system, be it schools, maintain nursery settings, colleges. There's a role for all parts of the education system, but yes, academies are mentioned as part of this. So there is something there, and you'll see it in my response. There is a reference to the work of academies in there as well, and multi-academy trusts as well in particular.
Any other comments or questions? Nothing in the room. I don't see any hands up. So the recommendation, I think, was just to consider the content and comment on the content of the report. So I think that recommendation is complete and approved. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Chair and colleagues.
Okay, so moving on to the next item of the agenda, item 10, which is the National Drugs Strategy, which is in the hands of the Senior Public Health Manager. And sorry, that's on pages 39 to 47 of your agenda pack.
Thank you, Chair. I will hand over to Sarah, who's on the screen in a moment, but I just wanted to give a really quick intro to this paper. So it's very early days with this work. So we've only just since the new year had announcement of this strategy coming down and what it means. So we're very rapidly trying to work through some of the detail in terms of our submission of how we plan to spend some of the money that's coming down to us and the kind of overarching direction of travel with the strategy. So this is quite an early bringing it to this board to set the scene on the direction of travel with it and what it might include and how we might take it forward and what it might mean for children and young people in drug and alcohol services in Luton. So some of it you may think at the moment is quite lacking in detail, but it's because it's still very new and still coming down the track. And just the point around acronyms, I just was quickly looking to check that we hadn't had any in ours, and just to say that CGL is our drug and alcohol provider, so it stands for Change, Grow, Live, and I don't think we've spelt it out, but that's just the provider of our drug and alcohol services. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah, thank you.
Right, thank you. So I did send a presentation. I don't know whether you're able to share that or whether you would just like me to talk through the strategy and where we are so far.
Don't know, can we share it?
Shall I try?
Yeah, please, if you can see whether you're able to share it. Yes, please.
It's in everybody's packs, but if you had it on the screen, it would probably help, Sarah, if you can do that.
Okay, I'm just trying to find it. Have you got it to hand?
I'm not logged into the. There you go.
Is that it?
Yes, we can see it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we can see that. Yeah.
Okay, so you've got this in your pack, so you can read this in, have this for nighttime reading. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of history on it. This came out in December of this year. It's called From Harm to Hope, and I often get that round the wrong way, which is absolutely awful. And basically, this is covering 3 years worth of work. Within the strategy, there are 3 pillars spoken about. The first pillar is going to be the responsibility of the police to see what they're going to do around the problem of drugs and alcohol. The third pillar is around achieving a shift in demand for drugs, which is something we've been calling for a long time, but there hasn't been guidance on that yet. The second pillar is around treatment, and that's what we as a public health department have been given the responsibility of delivering, and we will be scrutinised on that. Now, in terms of funding, some of you may well have heard the eye-watering amounts that are attached to this policy and strategy. And the way that the government has kind of divided the funding up is on a 50-50-50 basis. So the first 50 local authorities will get funding this year. But Luton isn't in the first year of the funding, it's in the second tranche. So we will not be really seeing any of this additional funding for another year yet. And what they've based that on really is drug-related deaths. And in Luton, we obviously have our drug-related deaths, but they're not as high as some other authorities. So when we look at the treatment pillar that we have responsibility for, it talks about creating a world-class treatment service. Our current treatment provider is CGL, as Sally's just explained, Change, Grow, Live. They had a 5-year contract with us, and we've just extended that for 2 years as is. So we will be looking to go back out to recommissioning perhaps the latter part of this year, very early the following year. So in terms of funding this year, the government have given Luton an increase of £100,000, £100,000, sorry, yes. And with that funding, what we've decided to do is, because we've got a really, really small public health team that looks after substance misuse, in fact, it's just me and we have an agency staff, that we are going to use the funding to bolster our public health service up. So we are looking to employ a commissioner and an analyst in the first year with that uplift funding. Now, the reason for that is twofold. One, we obviously need someone to lead on this piece of work regarding the world-class treatment service. And secondly, we will obviously be coming to that point where we need to recommission our drug and alcohol services. So it's really important that we have a drug and alcohol commissioner to take this work forward. Now, your interest in this is obviously around young people, and the treatment money that we are going to be getting does cover young people. But at this moment in time, we are not really looking for an increase in treatment for young people, and the reason for that is we have 5 full-time workers at CGL, and they deliver work into schools. They provide interventions at the hub in Victoria Street. They have new family intervention programs, but the numbers of young people in treatment in Luton remain very low. Now, that isn't something that just is seen in Luton. We're seeing this regionally and nationally. The reasons for it are quite wide, and they're a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. But at this moment in time, we have got room in Luton to take more referrals and take more young people. So when I talked about where we're going to increase our team, what we're going to try and do is, in this first year, once we've bolstered up our public health team, is to get out to services, get out to professionals, do lots of promotions, really, really, really try and get out there so people know how to refer, they know how to speak to young people who have got issues, they know how to identify early, they know what questions to ask. So that in year 2, when we get the enhanced funding, if needed, we can start to look at employing more staff. But it's really not worth doing that at this moment in time because we haven't got the numbers. We are looking to create a different model working with young people moving on. And that is, we're trying to really have a proactive approach. We know a lot of young people out there don't want to go into treatment services. So we know that what we have to do is to really train frontline staff to feel confident in addressing those issues with young people. And what we're trying to do is to set up a system where if, say, a teacher has identified an issue with a young person, but that young person doesn't want to go into service, that we can actually use CGL to contact that teacher and actually help them and support them to work with that young person in the hope that they will eventually want to go to CGL and have some professional support. So in terms of our priorities in public health, this strategy really talks about us being scrutinised on what we're doing and how we're spending the money. It also talks about public health departments needing to provide annual needs assessments and JSNAs. There's going to be a lot of reporting back because obviously this is a lot of money and the government want to make sure that we're spending it wisely. So the new team that we will have in public health will be able to support that and feed back to the government on the interventions and how we're doing. The past 2 weeks, we have been completing a template looking at how we will spend that funding in year 2 and year 3. It's really quite detailed. We're hoping that we will get sign off for that once we send that on Friday, but we can report back to this board and let you know what's happening. But really, the important things for us as a public health team are getting that needs assessment done, staff training, and really working with professionals in Luton to make sure that we equip them with the skills that they need to work with young people. I don't think that I've missed anything in particular. Really, the pillar that we're looking at is to look at reducing drug-related deaths, but we don't tend to have them for young people, increase the treatment places, and to also retain staff at CGL, and also to reduce the caseloads because we've got really high caseloads, and also to increase the number of treatment places that are available, because obviously the police have got their pillar to look after. So we're probably going to see an increase in people that are entering the criminal justice system that need a treatment place. So we need to make sure that we've got that, and we've got rehab facilities for them. So that's it in a nutshell. Happy to take questions.
Councillor Moss?
What a job you've got.
You can say that again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be quite honest, around the high schools, most high schools in Luton have somebody in a black car usually supplying the pupils as they come out of school. And I can never understand why, if you ring 111, is it 111? Yeah, the police one. Is it, or which is the health one? I get them muddled up. But people say, I've rung the police. We know exactly where they are. There's children all around the car, but nobody ever comes. And I don't know how you're ever going to get on top of it.
Well, hopefully that's the police that will be looking at getting on top of that. But we do have intelligence numbers that you can call if you see things like that happening. Thank you. We do have intelligence numbers that you can call if you do see something like that happening. And I'm happy to raise that with our colleagues with the police if that's happening. You're absolutely right that, you know, these drug dealers are on the corner of every street. And, you know, additional problems that we've got at the moment as well, there's the number of young people who are actually buying their drugs online as well, which is the new issue that we have. But hopefully with this new funding and the police really looking at how they're going to tackle, because they're going to be scrutinised over this, how they're going to tackle these issues, hopefully, you know, some of those concerns that you're raising, Councillor, will actually be looked at.
Can I just one more thing? The police are constantly telling us that they're understaffed and they haven't got time for things like that. And I can appreciate it. Obviously, there are priorities. But when it comes to children, is it not possible that some training can be given to the teachers at the schools?
Absolutely.
There is, is there?
There will have been training. And that's what we were talking about. We need to support these staff. Thank you. We need to support these staff so that they know how to deal with these issues if they see it going on, or if they're faced with it with the young person.
Before we move on, Sarah, if you could stop sharing your
Sorry,
screen,
I thought
please.
I had.
That's fine.
Is that better?
No, we can still see it. If you go up next to the leave red button there, just to the left of it, there's a share icon. I think if you click on that, you should be able to stop. That's it. Yeah.
Sorry.
Good. That's okay. No problem. Councillor Wahid, and then Derek.
For your presentation, Sarah. And what is it from high school to what age till this intervention?
The service that we commission is for young people up to the age of 25.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Councillor Keynes, did you have something?
Yeah. As Councillor Mole said, you've got a hell of a job here. Good luck. Page 45. In years 2 and 3, we'll get more funding and proposing to bolster adult treatment. Surely we should be aiming this at the youngsters rather than the adults. But I mean, I bow to your knowledge on this, but it's the youngsters I think you've got to stop before you get the adults involved.
You're absolutely right there. And that my answer to that is twofold. One, the provider that we've got is not seeing a lot of young people being referred, so they've got the capacity to see lots more young people. So that's why we're not bolstering that team at the moment. But if we start to promote the service more and we see an increase in referrals, that will be the first thing that I do. But you're absolutely right when talking about prevention. We have to do more with young people. That has been my argument over the past few weeks with OHID, and what we're being informed is they're sorting this out first, but over the next few months there will be money coming down for prevention, and that's really where we need to get to work and try and tackle some of these issues, because you're absolutely right, these issues begin in schools, and if we could work with these young people, because they're very much like adults, something's going on in their world and it's not right, and they're self-medicating with drugs and alcohol just like adults do, and we really need to get in quick so that we're not sweeping up these issues into the corner for more adults in the future.
The only other comment really I've got is Councillor Moles brings this a black car. It's a white car in Havelock Road.
Right, I'll remember that.
I can even give you the registration number. One other stupid little thing. What's churn mean?
Churn, that means I was in a meeting this morning. Do you want to just I've got a really bad feedback. Can you turn your mic off, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. I was in a meeting this morning, and perhaps give you an example what churn is, what churn means. We were talking about the street drinkers in Luton, and what we were talking about is we get them sorted out and they move on, and then we have more people coming in that are street drinking, and it's the churn. You have more people coming in, you sort them out, and then the churn happens, and then you've got more people with the same issues. I hope that's explained. It's just the turn of people, the number of turnover of people.
Perhaps we should have a glossary then on children and youngsters terms.
Perhaps that's my taking on it.
Any Councillor Malcolm? Yep.
Thank you. I can see from the presentation that we're awaiting further guidance on what sounds like a very laudable aim of achieving a generational shift in demand for drugs. So I guess we're waiting on central government for them to flesh out that part of the plan. And I guess it's a very sensible vision to try and achieve it, to try and achieve, you know, reduce drug taking in our population by seeking to, you know, markedly reduce the level of drug taking from one generation to the next, and trying to break any connection that there is within households. I guess I would ask, could you talk a bit more about that from your existing knowledge? Is there a connection within households? Do we know what the research says about actually breaking any generational impact of drug users and children becoming drug users? And actually, if we're already putting together our plan for where the money's all going to be spent, there's not going to be any money left for this aim. Maybe you're already taking it into account in your own way of how to do this and deliver on it. But I guess it seems like a very sensible aim, but there's nothing on it yet. So I wonder whether you're doing that yourself, whether you know what the research says, and whether you're already implementing projects that are going to achieve that.
Thank you. I think there was quite a few questions there. I'll try and see if I can remember them all. In terms of the third pillar, which is achieving a shift in demand, that is really more police related. We haven't seen any guidance yet, but it's really about that middle market, occasional users of cocaine. Now, as I say, we haven't heard anything yet, but there are rumours that they are going to start doing things like, if they arrest somebody for recreational use, take away their passports or their driving licenses. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work, and it is rumour at the moment, but it is, that pillar will be the responsibility of the police. Once we get some guidance on that and what's actually in that, I'm happy to come back to you. In terms of the work that you're talking about, I think that's that early intervention and that prevention, and we are doing a lot of work. We are in all of the schools in Luton. We update our training. We put workshops on wellbeing days. We're not quite unsure what's going on with young people and why we're not seeing them in services. There are a number of thoughts. They are the generations that have had lots of alcohol education in schools. Perhaps that's worked. There's a lot of prevention out there and being able to pick young people up. When we look at our treatment service, the cohorts that we see with the real ingrained drug and alcohol problems tend to be people in their 40s, 50s and 60s that were never really educated about the harms of use. But we are looking to develop our model of working with young people within our provider CGL to have a more proactive delivery. And we're hoping that as soon as this new funding comes down, looking at prevention, we can start to really look at what's the need in Luton and how we can help those families that are seeing these types of issues. Our provider has recently been trained and is now delivering a program called Impact. And that is working with the whole family, not just the adults or the young person that might have an issue. It's working with the whole family. Our provider also offers what we call affected support or significant other support. And that's where it's not you that's got the problem with substance misuse, but it's somebody you might be living with. So they actually support the families as well. So there is a lot going on, but it has been a really, really difficult time during COVID. We've, like everywhere, we've got real recruitment issues. So I'm hoping when this funding comes into our pockets here in Luton that we can begin to do some really good work. Does that answer everything?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was, I maybe misunderstood what they'd set out, but I think it was particularly that connection, like where there's a household where there are drug users as parents, whether that transitions to those children. But it sounds like you've got interventions that are specifically targeted as well as universal service to kind of avoid drug take-up. Thank you.
That's right. And I think your last question was around the funding. In the template, I have already adjusted that so that we can have young people's workers. So it's already in my mind.
Thank you. Dr. Mohammed Al-Mrahi.
Thank you, Chair. This is really interesting. And just to pick up on the point that Sarah alluded to earlier on, regarding prevention is better than cure. And I'm just thinking about the local population of Luton in terms of ethnicities and demographies. I wonder if there is any, your research has revealed any sort of link between the ethnicities and drug and alcohol issues and of course the next question will be to that, if there is such a correlation or link between the two, what are the steps and measures that are perhaps required to address this within our local community? Because what may work in another local community, elsewhere in the country, may not work in Luton, and vice versa. So just to be more focused and more targeted when we talk about prevention is better than cure, I'm just wondering what your research has revealed in that context. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think the research has showed us that drugs and alcohol really does impact lots of families in Luton. You couldn't just pull out one and say these are the groups that we're going to target. Within our service, however, it is white British that we're seeing. So we do know that we do need to do a lot of other work with community groups, and we were also looking at, going onto local radio. We're employing BAME workers, all those things that we're doing with the adult service. But it's really difficult. It's a bit of a chicken and egg story, really. We can't put all of those in place till we've got the young people coming into the service. Otherwise, we're going to have people sitting around twiddling their thumbs waiting for, someone to come in and work with. So we're hoping that when we have this new and improved public health team, where we've got a coordinator, we've got an analyst, we've got myself, and we've got the commissioner, that we can really look at what's going on in Luton. The first job that we've got the commissioner to do when we finally recruit will be to do a all singing, all dancing needs assessment, so we can have a look at what's going on. We also want to do some work with triangulating data as well, where we look at other services data to see whether we can identify young people that are on their radar, they're on our radar and somebody else's, to see whether we can pick them up much earlier. I'm sure that there's a wealth of data out there that we need to be using more wisely.
Sure, Sarah, if I may come back on this point, you're absolutely right, because in this group we have been presented by John Wigglesworth in a previous meeting. He presented Luton Education Strategy for Children, family, on equality, diversity, inclusion, and part of his report revealed that over 80%, and I'm saying 80%, 80% of school pupils in Luton are from Black, Asian, and minority ethnic backgrounds. So that begs the question in terms of what are the solutions and what are the expenditure that we are making as local authority. If this is going to impact on the 20%, what about the 80%? You said that there is a white British, this is one thing, but what about the 80% in our local schools? And why we are not focusing on maximizing the return of the expenditure on that in the prevention journey that we are hoping to achieve? Thank you.
Thank you. And I really hear what you're saying, and we have already had some of these conversations. There is very, very minimal research out there, or evidence out there, sorry, would probably be the right word, on what works with young people in terms of trying to support them with drug and alcohol issues, because in the past we've put workshops on, given out leaflets, etc. One pilot project that's really evaluating really well is looking at it, rather than having one-to-one sessions with somebody and it's all booked, they're looking at venues where young people can just turn up. So there's, it helps to reduce those barriers, that, the stigma that's attached to going to an agency. So when I talked about that new model, that's what we're really going to try and build in, so that that place is open, because they're talking about they want places open at the weekends and in the evenings. They don't want an appointment system. They just want to be able to turn up. So all of those things we are trying to build into our new model. And also what else is evaluated really well is cultural counselling. So again, they're all of the things that I'm hoping to commission moving forward.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Nope. Okay. Thanks, Sarah, for the report. I think the recommendation is just to note the report. So it's noted. Yeah. Thanks for your time. Cheers. So moving on to the next item of the agenda, item 11, which is to look at the draft work programme for the next coming meetings. That's on pages 48 to 61 of the agenda. So
Isn't all this a bit like, Chair?
it's a bit light, yeah. So obviously with the since the annual meeting, this is our first meeting back, and to be honest, we haven't had a chance to catch up together to firm up the
I know
the upcoming agenda.
I know Mr. Collins can talk, but he ain't going to be able to talk for a whole meeting.
So it is only a draft, and I'm sure Amanda and I will be catching up to add items to the meeting in August and going forward. But if any member has anything in particular that they do want to add to the next meeting or the forward plan, then do please feel free to raise it here or drop me an email. We can look at adding that. Yep.
Just I think it would be good to bring back the children and young people's mental health action plan as it develops, but I'll have to check in with the person in my team that's leading on it around the timing of when that makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Malcolm. Yeah.
Would it make sense to ask for an update on making Luton a child-friendly town? Luton a child-friendly town, given it's one of the 5 things. It feels like the right place to have an update on that.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Amanda, do you want to come in on that?
I think that's a really important point, Councillor Malcolm. My preference would be that we don't do that in August, because we build it into our work programme only because of the position that we brought previously and the plan post our full Ofsted inspection, which we're expecting to commence from either Monday or the following Monday, that will build our bigger engagement programme of work. So I think that it would be great to bring that draft back, and the Luton 2040 conference will also have taken place. So I think what I would suggest, Councillor Lee, because I will follow up why our meeting isn't in the diary. I can't see it for some reason, but that just might be my oversight, because it's Sally, you, Councillor Lee and myself have agreed to meet so we can populate that work programme. So we'll make sure that happens and that you sign that off as chair.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do have regular meetings usually before upcoming scrutiny meetings, but I think because of the this is the first one since the annual meeting, I don't think we had any in the diary this time round, but certainly perhaps see whether I can get Bert to add one into the agenda going forward. Terry?
I was only going to say that at the end of this item is future items to be programmed, and there's 6, 7, 8 items. Well, we don't want them all to suddenly come together, do we? In one.
No, absolutely, and that's sort of one of the purposes of it for having these meetings between Amanda and myself. We will see. A lot of it depends on the timing as well. So we will make sure that we don't have everything together in one meeting, because that will be a long meeting. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? No. And as I said, I mean, anything comes to mind that you might want added, then let me know, and I can discuss with Amanda. Drop me an email. Yeah. Okay. So that completes, I think, item 11. There's nothing under item 12, so I think we can close the meeting. Thanks everyone for your time. Thank you.